She grabbed my arm on the red carpet, smiled into a microphone, and introduced me to a ballroom full of donors as my first mistake. People laughed like it was cute. Cameras flashed. My face went hot. My throat closed, and she kept smiling like I wasn't even human. Here's how it happened. Jeff, that's me, used to believe love could outwork anything. I'm a black man from Southwest Atlanta who learned early that pride doesn't pay rent, but loyalty can build a life. When I met Shonda, she was sharp, funny, and ambitious in a way that felt like sunlight. I loved that she wanted more. I loved that she pulled me toward it. I just didn't realize she was pulling me somewhere I wouldn't recognize myself. When Shonda got offered a leadership role at a nonprofit in the D.C. area, she called it our next chapter. We packed up like a team, me labeling boxes, her on speakerphone with board members, both of us eating greasy pizza on the floor of an empty living room. She kissed tomato sauce off my lip and said, "Look at us grown." I laughed and told her we were one argument away from buying matching blazers. She snorted, "Don't embarrass me." It felt playful then, like we were in on the joke together. The first months in Maryland were tight. Her checks came late, and she had a habit of saying, "It'll work out," while I did the math. I picked up extra contract work and pretended it didn't bother me. Some nights, I'd come home exhausted and find her practicing speeches in the mirror, tilting her chin like she was already somebody important. I'd clap quietly from the doorway, and she'd grin, run over, and jump into my arms like we were kids. Those moments made me ignore the rest. We still had romance in our little apartment. On Fridays, I'd cook salmon, overcooked every time, and she'd act like it was 5-star. She put on old-school R&B and dragged me around the kitchen. I can't dance. I do what I call responsible swaying. Shonda called it an HR-approved two-step. She'd laugh so hard she'd snort, and I'd kiss her mid-laugh because that sound was my favorite thing in the world. Back then, I thought we were building something unbreakable. Then, the networking started. It began as innocent. Happy hours, donor dinners, just one more event. She'd come home smelling like perfume that wasn't hers, talking fast, eyes bright. She'd tell me names like they were currency. "This is Keisha. She's on 2 boards. This is Anthony. He knows everybody." I'd listen, proud, but uneasy, like someone watching their home remodel into a house they can't afford. When I asked why she was always gone, she'd say, "This is what growth looks like, Jeff." Her new circle treated me like background noise. At parties, Shonda would float away and leave me holding her coat like a valet. Her friend would talk around me. Real estate, titles, who's up next. When I tried to join in, one of the men, Darnell, would grin like I was adorable. "Jeff, right? You still doing that tech stuff?" I'd say my job title, and he'd nod slowly like I'd admitted I collect bottle caps. Shonda wouldn't defend me. She'd laugh lightly and move on, like it wasn't worth the oxygen. The humiliations got sharper. Shonda started joking about me in public, but not the cute married couple kind. More like she was sanding me down for an audience. "Jeff is sweet, but he's simple. Jeff doesn't understand how rooms work." Once, in front of her coworkers, she said, "He's lucky I saw potential." I laughed because I didn't know what else to do, and everybody laughed with me, not at the joke, at the permission she gave them to laugh at me. At home, she acted like I was too sensitive. "It's not that deep," she'd say, scrolling her phone while I stood there trying to explain how it felt. If I pushed, she'd turn cold. "Do you want to hold me back, Jeff?" That question always shut me up because I never wanted to be the reason she didn't become who she dreamed of being. So I swallowed things. I swallowed pride, anger, loneliness. I swallowed the feeling that my marriage was starting to look like a stage and I was the prop. The cheating wasn't obvious at first. It looked like overtime, like late meetings, like her coming home with her earrings in her purse and her lipstick mysteriously gone. If I asked, she'd roll her eyes like I was a child. "You watch too much TV." The worst part wasn't even the suspicion. It was the way she treated my concern like a character flaw. Like trusting her was foolish and doubting her was pathetic. Either way, I was wrong. One Sunday, her mother came to town and took us out to brunch in Baltimore. Her mom, Mrs. Gaines, always loved Shonda loud and loved me quietly, like I was a nice sweater she didn't want her daughter wearing outside. Over shrimp and grits, Mrs. Gaines asked Shonda about work, and Shonda launched into a speech about impact and legacy. When her mom asked about me, Shonda patted my hand and said, "Jeff holds it down." Bless him. Like I was an unpaid intern in our own life. Mrs. Gaines smiled. I stared at my plate. That night, I couldn't sleep. I opened my laptop and started writing. Not a confrontation, just a plan. I listed what I could control: my money, my time, my dignity. I've been quietly building a side business for months anyway. Small contracts, nothing flashy. But I realized I needed to stop letting my marriage be the place I hemorrhaged myself. I opened a separate account, registered an LLC, and made a rule: no bragging, no hinting, no I'll show you. Just building. Quiet. Private. Mine. The charity gala showed up like a thunderclap. Shonda said her nonprofit was hosting a scholarship fundraiser at a hotel in downtown D.C. "It's a big deal," she told me, adjusting her dress in the mirror. "I need you there, Jeff." The way she said "need" made me think for a second she meant with her. Like partnership. So I rented tux. I got a haircut. I even practiced smiling in the mirror like the men in cologne commercials. I told myself maybe this was a reset. There was still romance, even on the way. In the car, she reached over and fixed my bow tie. Her fingers brushed my throat, and for a second, I felt that old warmth. I cracked a joke, told her I looked like a penguin with bills. She laughed, the real laugh, and said, "You're handsome, Jeff." I held on to that one sentence like it was proof we weren't broken. I didn't know she was about to snap me in half in public. The hotel lobby was dripping with money. Marble floors, chandeliers, people moving like they had places to be even while standing still. Shonda glowed in her dress, greeting donors like family. I tried to match her energy, but her colleagues barely acknowledged me. A photographer called them over to the step and repeat. Shonda grabbed my arm with a grip that felt like control, not affection. The interviewer smiled. "And who are you to Shonda?" I opened my mouth to say her husband. Shonda beat me to it. "This is my husband," she said, sweet as syrup, then laughed and added, "My first mistake." She leaned into the mic like she was doing stand-up. People chuckled. A woman fanned herself like it was hilarious. I felt my ears ring. I waited for Shonda to wink, to signal it was a joke between us. She didn't. She just smiled into the lights like I wasn't standing there, alive and burning. The interviewer laughed too. Oh wow, like humiliation was charming. After that, she kept doing it. To board members, to donors, to people I'd never see again. "Jeff's my first mistake. The first draft. Before I leveled up." Each time, the room responded because she trained them to. When I tried to step away, she'd pull me back with that same grip. "Don't be weird," she whispered through her smile. "Stop sulking. You're embarrassing me." Like my pain was the real problem, not her cruelty. I drifted around the ballroom like a ghost in a tux. Waiters passed with tiny crab cakes I couldn't swallow. Darnell slapped my shoulder. "Man, you're a good sport," he said, smirking. Couldn't be me. One of Shonda's friends, Keisha, looked me up and down and said, "Jeff, you must really love her because few." I tried to laugh, and it came out thin. The DJ played love songs. Couples swayed. I stood alone, married and abandoned in a room full of people. At one point, Shonda disappeared to the bar with a man I'd seen in her phone under a mentor. Anthony. He leaned close when he talked, like he wanted people to notice. Shonda laughed too loudly, touching his arm. I watched her face soften in a way it hadn't for me in months. When she glanced my way, her eyes didn't apologize. They warned me. Like, don't ruin this. I felt something in me go still. Not rage. Not tears. Just the quiet click of realizing I was not safe with her. I went to the restroom and stared at myself under harsh light. The tux fit. The haircut was clean. I looked like a man who should have been respected. I leaned over the sink and tried to breathe through the tightness in my chest. I remembered Shonda in our old Atlanta kitchen dancing with me, calling my bad moves HR approved. I remembered thinking love meant enduring. Standing there, I finally understood. Endurance isn't the same as dignity. I dried my hands and told myself, you don't have to beg to be treated like a person. Back in the ballroom, the auction started. Items rolled by. Weekend trips, signed jerseys, fancy dinners. Shonda worked the room like a politician, laughing, hugging, performing. Every now and then she'd glance at me like I was a purse she forgot on a chair. People raised paddles. Money flew. I felt detached, like my body was present, but my spirit had stepped outside to get air. Still, I stayed quiet. Not because I was weak, but because I wanted no part of turning scholarship money into a marital shouting match. Near the end, the auctioneer tapped the mic before our final item. He said, "We have a special announcement." The room leaned in. Shonda straightened like a sunflower toward the sun. She squeezed my hand so hard my knuckles popped. "This is it," she whispered, eyes shining. I didn't know what she meant until I saw her glance toward Anthony, like he was part of her story. My stomach turned. The auctioneer smiled. Tonight's gala has already been fully underwritten. Gasps. Applause. Shonda's smile widened like she'd won something. The auctioneer continued. "That means every dollar raised tonight goes directly to scholarships." People cheered louder. Shonda started to step forward, already preparing to bask in it. Then the auctioneer added, "The sponsor requested privacy. No stage, no plaque, no publicity. Just one condition. The underwriting is tied to a specific name and signature." He looked at his card. Jeff Carter. My name didn't boom. It landed. Heavy and undeniable. Heads turned, not in celebration, but in recalibration. Shonda's face flickered, confusion, then calculation. Her grip on my hand tightened again, but now it was possessive. She leaned in and hissed, "Why would you do something like this without telling me? Not thank you. Not are you okay. Just anger that I had a life she couldn't control." I felt oddly calm, like my body finally found solid ground. Shonda recovered fast, too fast. She laughed and turned to the board chair. "Surprise," she said loudly, like she'd orchestrated it. "We wanted the kids to have everything." She emphasized we like she could stitch herself into my decision by force. The board chair's expression didn't match her excitement. It was polite but sharp. "Shonda," the chair said, "you told us a donor was in negotiations through you." Shonda didn't blink. "Yes," she said, smiling. "And here he is." Then she did it again, because cruelty was her default. She leaned toward a little cluster of donors and said, "Jeff is my first mistake, but at least he's finally paying for something." A few people laughed reflexively, then stopped when nobody important joined in. The air chilled. I watched Shonda's eyes. No remorse, no hesitation. She enjoyed the knife. She liked twisting it, liked showing she could. Something inside me settled. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was who she chose to be. I excused myself calmly. No scene, no storming out. I walked down a quiet hallway to the hotel business center. The room smelled like toner and stale carpet. I pulled out my phone and sent one email to my attorney. "File it." Then I sent another email to the nonprofit's board council with 2 PDFs attached. My underwriting agreement with donor privacy and branding restrictions, and documentation of irregular transfers from our joint account into an account Shonda had opened without telling me. No accusations, just facts. Paper doesn't argue. It just sits there, undeniable. While I walked back toward the ballroom, my phone lit up, Shonda calling. Again. A text followed. "Where are you?" They're asking questions. "What did you do?" Not "Are you okay?" Not "Please." Panic, not care. I didn't answer. I returned to the edge of the room and watched from a distance as the board chair pulled Shonda aside. They spoke with that quiet firmness rich rooms use when they're done playing polite. Shonda's smile started cracking at the corners. Anthony, her mentor, hovered for a second, then stepped back like he suddenly remembered he had somewhere else to be. That told me everything. The second Shonda stopped looking useful, she stopped looking lovable. Shonda's friends, the ones who laughed at first mistake, avoided eye contact now. People don't like being caught on the wrong side of reality. I didn't gloat. I just watched the consequences start forming, slow and inevitable, like a storm you can finally see coming. Shonda turned her head and spotted me. Her eyes flashed with anger, pure, unfiltered. She marched toward me like she was going to scold a child. "You're trying to sabotage me," she hissed through her teeth, still careful to keep her voice low enough to appear composed. I looked at her and felt something surprising. Sadness, yes, but also relief. No, I said quietly. I'm trying to save myself. She scoffed. Save yourself from what? From a woman who made you. She didn't even hear how ugly that sounded. I left the gala without a goodbye speech. I didn't take a victory lap. I got into my car and drove to a 24-hour diner in Prince George's County because my hand was shaking and I needed coffee and bright lights and strangers who didn't know my name. The waitress called me Han, and I almost cried over it. I ordered breakfast at midnight and laughed once. An actual laugh, because the menu offered romantic pancakes, and I was alone in a tux. Life has a weird sense of humor when you're getting your heart back. The next morning, Shonda came home furious, not humbled. She slammed the door hard enough to rattle the frame and said, "Do you know what you did?" I said, "I told the truth." She started pacing, talking about optics, reputation, how I humiliated her. The irony almost made me dizzy. When she realized I wasn't arguing, she switched tactics. Cold, mean. "You'll regret this," she said. "You don't have me to carry you." I nodded slowly and said, "That's the first honest thing you've said in months." By Monday, the board placed Shonda on administrative leave pending investigation. Not because she cheated, not because she mocked me, because she'd misrepresented donor relations and tried to position herself as the source of funds she didn't secure. Nonprofits don't play about credibility with money, especially scholarship money. Shonda didn't apologize. She doubled down. She called her mother and told her I was jealous. Mrs. Gaines called me to demand I fix it. I told her gently, "Ma'am, I can't fix what I didn't break." The fallout was quiet but absolute. Shonda's friends stopped inviting her out. Anthony stopped calling. The same people who laughed at my humiliation didn't want to be seen near her scandal. Shonda came home and threw accusations around like dishes. She tried to shame me into staying, call me small, call me ungrateful, called me a mistake again and again. I listened without yelling. I packed a suitcase while she talked. At one point she laughed and said, "Where would you even go?" I said, "Somewhere I can breathe." 2 weeks later, I moved into a small apartment in Silver Spring. It wasn't glamorous. It was clean, quiet, mine. The first night, I sat on the floor eating takeout and realized nobody was going to insult me for chewing too loud. Nobody was going to turn my love into a punchline. I played music and danced terribly by myself. Full HR-approved two-step. Laughing because it felt like reclaiming a piece of me that had been trapped. I texted my best friend back in Atlanta, "I'm free," and he responded, "About time, fool." The romantic part didn't arrive like a movie. It came slowly, in ordinary kindness. A month later, I ran into a woman named Nia at a bookstore in D.C. We reached for the same James Baldwin book and did that awkward hand dance people do when they both try to be polite. I said, "My bad." She said, "No, my bad." And we both laughed. We ended up talking by the shelf for 20 minutes. When she asked what I did, I told her I build things quietly. She smiled and said, "That's rare." Nia and I took it slow. Real slow. We did daytime coffee. Walks around the National Mall. A comedy show in Baltimore where the comedian roasted the audience and I laughed so hard I snorted. Then panicked because Shonda used to shame me for that. Nia just laughed with me and said, "You laugh like you mean it." Good. The first time she held my hand, I flinched without meaning to. She didn't make it weird. She just squeezed gently like, "I'm here, but I'm not forcing anything." Meanwhile, my private success kept growing. My LLC landed bigger contracts. I kept my head down. No social media bragging. No victory posts. Just steady work, steady deposits, steady peace. I kept donating to scholarships quietly because I never wanted kids to pay for my pain. Every time I signed a contract, I felt more like myself, like the man I used to be before I started shrinking to fit somebody else's ego. I didn't need Shonda's approval. I didn't need an audience. My progress was mine. Shonda, on the other hand, never softened. Even after her termination became official, she blamed everyone but herself. She sent me messages that swung from rage to manipulation. "You ruined me. You'll never find better. You owe me." When I didn't respond, she tried to bait me with shame. "You were nothing before me." I blocked her, not out of revenge, out of self-respect. My attorney handled the rest. Some people think blocking is petty. I think it's a boundary with a lock on it. One evening, months later, I sat on my couch with Nia, eating cheap Chinese food and watching a terrible rom-com. The movie's big dramatic speech made me groan. Nia nudged me and said, "You don't like grand gestures?" I looked at her and said, "I like steady." She smiled softly. "Me too." I realized then what romance is supposed to feel like. Not like a performance you have to earn, but like a place you can rest. That realization didn't come with fireworks. It came with peace. And peace is louder than people think. The moral lesson landed in my life like a quiet truth. Love without respect is just a slow kind of destruction. I spent years thinking being a good man meant taking hits silently, protecting someone who wouldn't protect me. But real partnership doesn't require you to bleed to prove you care. If someone humiliates you on purpose, especially in public, they're showing you who they are. Believe them the first time. Build your exit privately. Build your life quietly. And choose the kind of love that never needs you to be a punchline. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.